Good afternoon, and welcome to this news event hosted by the law firm Peiffer Wolf, Carr, Kane, Conway, and Wise, or Peiffer Wolf for short. You'll be hearing from two speakers today, and then we'll open the floor for questions during the Q&A period. The Q&A period will be for reporters only, and if you wish to ask a question, use the raise your hand function and your line will be unmuted when it is your turn to ask a question. For more information today, you can go to peifferwolf.com, where you can find the news release and link to the lawsuit filing, and also a direct link to the news release should be made available in the chat window here shortly. And as I mentioned, you'll be hearing from two speakers today. Our first speaker today will be Kevin Conway, partner at Peiffer Wolf, and our second speaker today will be Ashley Case-Sletbold, partner and lead counsel for the plaintiffs at Peiffer Wolf. But let's begin with our first speaker. Again, that's Kevin Conway, partner at Peiffer Wolf. Kevin?
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Conway, and I'm a partner at the law firm Peiffer Wolf, Carr, Kane, Conway, and Wise. We're here to announce that Peiffer Wolf has filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of diabetic inmates who were injected with contaminated insulin while they were in the custody of the Land O'Lakes Detention Center in Pasco County, Florida, sometimes referred to as the Pasco County Jail. Our investigation has revealed that diabetic patients, many of whom have never been convicted of a crime, were given insulin that was contaminated with other inmates' blood because a jail nurse double-dipped used needles in insulin vials. We believe this nurse, who is an employee of Wellpath LLC, a Pasco County contractor, was engaging in this practice for about a year, a practice most IV drug users know to avoid. Based on what we currently know, hundreds of people could be affected by contaminated injections. Most diabetic patients require more than one type of insulin each time they receive insulin injections. This means a nurse should put each of the different types of insulin into one syringe and then inject the patient one time, or just use another clean needle. Using the proper procedure ensures that patients receive the insulin in a safe and sanitary manner. But based on the information we have gathered, this Wellpath nurse would inject the patient with one type of insulin and then place that used needle into another vial for a different type of insulin to draw out more to inject the patient again. By putting a used needle into an insulin vial, the Wellpath nurse contaminated the vial with that patient's blood cells, which could include blood-borne diseases like HIV and hepatitis. We've also been told that this nurse and other Wellpath nurses made other careless errors when providing insulin to diabetic inmates, including failing to sterilize the tops of the vials before drawing insulin and providing incorrect doses of the insulin. This type of reckless behavior can lead to catastrophic consequences for diabetic patients, whose blood sugar levels must be carefully controlled with precise amounts of insulin. Safe injection practices in administering insulin to diabetic patients are nursing 101, but Wellpath hired nurses who either did not know how to safely administer insulin or simply didn't care. It's shocking that the Land O'Lakes Detention Center could allow inmates' lives to be put at risk, but it's even worse that none of the victims were informed. None of them could seek testing or take steps to protect their families. As my partner, Ashley Case-Sletbold, will explain in a moment, the Constitution prohibits deliberate indifference to inmates' medical needs. The inmates of the Land O'Lakes Detention Center deserve proper medical care, and they certainly don't deserve to be injected with contaminated needles. Thank you. That concludes my statement, and I look forward to taking your questions in the Q&A period.
Again, that was Kevin Conway, partner at Peiffer Wolf, and that takes us to our second speaker today. Our second speaker is Ashley Case-Sletbold, partner and lead counsel for the plaintiffs at Peiffer Wolf. Ashley?
My name is Ashley Case-Sletbold, and I'm a partner at Peiffer Wolf. I co-chair our civil rights practice. The Constitution requires that incarcerated people be given adequate medical care. We have filed this class action on behalf of diabetic patients in the Pasco County Jail because our investigation has revealed some disturbing information about Wellpath's practices for administering insulin. As my partner Kevin Conway explained, we have reason to believe that a nurse was placing needles she had already used to inject patients back into vials of insulin. And these contaminated vials were then returned to the med cart to be used to administer insulin to other diabetics, both by that nurse and by any nurse working in the facility. Earlier this month, an inmate witnessed a nurse carry out this dangerous procedure on an inmate with HIV. You do not have to be a medical professional to know that dipping a needle that has just been in someone's arm into a vial of insulin that will be used for other patients is dangerous and even deadly. For a nurse, it is simply egregious. It is our understanding that this nurse has double dipped in the insulin vials over the course of her employment for the past year. We are still gathering information to determine just how many people were potentially exposed to bloodborne diseases by this nurse's actions throughout her employment. But given that the jail usually has dozens of diabetic inmates in custody, and that most diabetic patients require insulin injections twice daily, the scope and magnitude of this crisis may be far-reaching, encompassing many individuals who have since gone on to different facilities or who have been released into the community and have no reason to know that they may be at risk. This lawsuit seeks to hold Wellpath and its employees accountable and require them to pay for inmates' medical monitoring for the diagnostic testing these exposed patients will require. It can take years for some illnesses to be detected in the body. And now the exposed patients must not only undergo this periodic testing, they must also endure the fear and anxiety of not knowing whether they could be carrying a serious disease. Now, Wellpath may claim that it had no idea that this nurse was contaminating insulin and that she's just one bad apple, but Wellpath had duties to properly train and supervise its personnel, and we have information to indicate that it did not. We've learned that Wellpath cut corners on training its nurses when they were hired into this facility. And as a result, Wellpath did not meet its obligation to ensure that its nurses were complying with sterile injection practices. As the complaint alleges, this was not a one-time incident with one nurse. This was a complete lack of care for some of the most vulnerable members of our society who were in Pasco County's custody with no ability to seek alternative medical care. Now, taking medicine for a serious medical condition like diabetes should not expose a person to HIV, hepatitis, or any other illness. And that's true whether you've been charged with a crime or not. This is a public health crisis that merits urgent attention by state and local government officials. We at Peiffer Wolf, along with and on behalf of our clients, call upon Florida's Department of Health to take swift remedial measures to identify, test, and treat the people affected, and to ensure that going forward, diabetics incarcerated in Pasco County are not subjected to dangerous injection practices. We also urge the Florida Attorney General and the State Attorney for Pasco County to investigate this matter to determine whether criminal charges are appropriate for injection practices that exposed countless diabetics to serious illness and death by failing to observe basic sterile procedures at the Land O'Lakes Detention Center. That concludes my statement. We will now take your questions.
Again, that was Ashley Case Sletbold, partner and lead counsel for the plaintiffs at Peiffer Wolf. And that takes us to the Q&A portion of the call. If you wish to ask a question, please use the raise your hand function and your line will be unmuted when it is your turn to ask a question. As a reminder, the Q&A period is for reporters only. If you are having issues with your own audio or the raise your hand function, you may also use the text-based Q&A box, and we'll do our best to get to all the questions. But before we take our first question, I want to mention that a video recording of this news event will be made available online later today at peifferwolf.com. Actually, that's up there. It will be up there later today around 3 or 4 o'clock. And along with the other media materials that are already there, including the news release and lawsuit filing. Again, that's peifferwolf.com, no spaces. All right, let's take our first question. Our first question comes from Natalie Weber at the Tampa Bay Times. Natalie, please make sure that your microphone is unmuted.
Hi, I just had one quick question. Are all of the plaintiffs currently still incarcerated at the Pasco County Jail?
I'll take that, Natalie. Thanks for the question. Yes, all of the named plaintiffs in the case, which were proceeding under initials, given the potential for disclosing HIV status, all of the individuals we represent are currently incarcerated. Our fear, however, is that there are individuals who've been released out into the community who have no reason to know that they've been affected.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, we want to make sure that reporters on the line have a chance to pose their questions. Once again, if you wish to ask a question, please use the raise your hand function, and your line will be unmuted when it is your turn to ask a question. As a reminder, the Q&A period is for reporters only. If you're having issues with your audio or the raise your hand function, you may also use the text-based Q&A box, and we'll do our best to get to all of those questions.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up where Ashley left off on her last response. To the best of our understanding right now, you know, there's anywhere from around 40 to 100 diabetic inmates at the Land O'Lakes Detention Center at any given time. And so really, if you start to extrapolate those numbers over the course of a year, you know, you're looking at anywhere from 29,000 to 73,000 contaminated injections. And, you know, when it comes to detention centers like this, it's not just who's incarcerated there at the moment, it's who gets released, it's who gets transferred to different facilities, and who gets back out into the community. And one of the things I really want to stress is that none of them were told that this happened. None of them were told why they were getting, some of them were getting blood tests, why some of them were now getting HIV drugs administered to them. So none of them even had an opportunity to know, to get tested on their own, to let their family members know if they're out. So this truly is a public health crisis.
And to follow up on that, on Kevin's statement just then, we really are, as we've dug into this, we've not been able to determine why the Pasco County Jail identified only, or why Wellpath identified only certain inmates to test, and why even among the group of those tested in the last week or two, only a subset of those individuals have been administered, you know, the HIV preventative drugs. So getting a grip on exactly why they've made the decisions that they've made in terms of how to address at least the most recent aspect of this crisis are certainly questions that we'll be planning to ask as we proceed with the case.
Looks like we have our next question now from Aaron Messmer with WTVT TV in Tampa. Aaron, please make sure that your mic is unmuted.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, guys. I just had a question. Has anybody so far who has been tested for an illness they didn't previously have, has anybody tested positive for that? And also, how did this come to your attention? Was it an inmate who brought it to your attention? Was it a family member?
So mine, from the folks that we've spoken to, some of the people have received test results back through the facility and others have not. It's varied. Some of the individuals, as I said, have been put on HIV prophylactics and some have not. Based on the current testing protocols and tests available for HIV, it can take between at least 2 to 8 weeks for a positive test to be, you know, for there to be enough of what they're testing for in the blood to be able to see a positive test. So it's too soon for anyone who was administered an injection last week to be coming up positive. Many inmates have reached out to us and continue to reach out to us. We encourage them to do that. We encourage their family members to do that. We are committed to getting to the bottom of this disaster and ensuring that everybody who's affected and their families get the care that they need.
Great. Well, I want to make sure that reporters on the line have one last chance to pose questions. And as a reminder, if you wish to ask a question, use the raise your hand function and your line will be unmuted when it is your turn to ask a question. Again, the Q&A period is for reporters only. If you're having issues with your audio or the raise your hand function, you may also use the text-based Q&A box, and we'll try to get to those questions as well. It doesn't look like we have any additional questions at this time. So I just want to go back to our speakers, Kevin and Ashley, to see if you have any closing thoughts before we close today.
Sure, I'll go first, and then Ashley, you can wrap this up. I just really want to stress that this is an absolute nightmare that shocks the conscience. I can't even fathom, this occurring. This is truly a practice that is avoided like the plague by IV drug users. Dirty needles, dirty vials every single day. It's unbelievable, and it's truly a public health crisis, because we just know from crunching the numbers that we've already done that this could be just such a wide reaching problem that has potential to spread, and it's just such a preventable, reckless behavior.
And I'll close by adding on to that. Whether someone is in custody or not, they are entitled to adequate medical care, and they're entitled to know when their care providers make a mistake, and they're required to provide and be given the opportunity to provide informed consent for any testing or any medication that they're given. Diabetics who rely on insulin to survive shouldn't have to fear that the medicine they take to save their lives might be ending it.
Thank you, Ashley and Kevin. Well, we want to make sure where you know where to get more information following today's news conference. To connect with either speakers that you've heard from today, either Ashley or Kevin, or to get more information, you can contact Whitney Dunlap at 614-450-0255. Again, that's Whitney Dunlap at 614-450-0255. A recording of this news event will be made available later today at the Peiffer Wolf website, along with all of the related media materials, which are now available online at peifferwolf.com. I want to thank everyone today for joining this news event, again, hosted by the law firm Peiffer Wolf, Carr, Kane, Conway, and Wise. And that concludes today's news event. Thank you.